Hey you guys, here I am again in my naked ass room doing another book review. I think that probably as far as the recorded stuff goes, this one and I think there'll be one more recorded review that will be in this naked room. But hopefully from then on, I'll have a nice background in the back because if you're new here and you've never seen any of my videos before, normally I have like a really cool background with a bunch of books and cool lights and everything like that. But I'm in the middle of moving, so this is my old studio and I haven't got the new studio set up yet. So that's why the background looks like ass. Just, thought I would explain to everybody. So the book I'm talking about today was one that I was highly anticipating. This was a book, it came out back in summer of 2020 in hardback, and I don't normally think about buying hardbacks because they're super expensive. I mean, unless I get the, super cheap ones at Barnes & Noble or something. But I actually did think about it in this regard because there was a lot of buzz about it. It was like on the New York Times bestseller list. It was a book club selection and all this other kind of stuff. And it sounded super cool because I really like Gothic horror, like Gothic literature. And this seemed right up my alley. And I saw a lot of really positive reviews of it on several horror channels that I watch. Now, I did actually eventually end up waiting until it came out in paperback. And I actually bought this paperback in a Barnes & Noble, like for the first time I'd been to one like in a really long time. And I bought this one and one other one that I'm going to review later. But this is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. Now, as I said, this came out in 2020. The paperback, I guess, came out like pretty recently. And this book has been compared to everything from Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. It's been called, it's sort of like Lovecraft inspired. It's sort of Poe inspired. It's a bit like Jane Eyre. It's kind of like a modern take. Well, not that modern because it's actually set in 1950, but it's kind of a modern take on the Gothic horror novel. And I have to say, I absolutely loved this book. I just thought it was just the whole atmosphere of it. Because like I said, I love all those tropes. I love creepy old crumbling mansions and family secrets and curses and all that kind of stuff. I love that kind of shit, cemeteries. And so this was just right. This just hit all of my love buttons as far as like books go. So you pretty much, I mean, unless this like was really badly written, which it's not, it's actually really awesomely written. I was probably going to love it. And indeed I do. Now, I guess Silvia Moreno-Garcia, this might be, I don't know if this is like her third novel. She's written a few novels beforehand. She does some stuff for NPR as well. She wrote actually a couple of cool essays. I don't know if they're in the hardback or not. There's a couple essays like about Gothic horror in general. There's like an interview with her. There's book club stuff in the back of the paperback. And there's also an excerpt from another novel or another short story in the back. So you actually get a lot of stuff with this. So the story centers around our protagonist. As I said, it's set in 1950. Now, at the beginning, our protagonist, whose name is Noemi, I guess I'm pronouncing that correctly, I hope. She's kind of like a wealthy socialite, like maybe like in her early 20s, very modern woman. She's kind of a fashion plate. She's sort of, flirtatious, and she's not really worried about, marriage or getting tied down or being traditional or anything like that. She kind of likes to go out and party and have a good time and everything. So she's still living in her father's house, and I guess her father's, family is very wealthy. Now, when she was growing up, she lives in Mexico City, by the way. When she was growing up, her best friend was her cousin, Catalina. So they've kind of kept in touch over the years, like with letters and everything. But very recently, Catalina has married this English guy named Virgil Doyle, and he has taken her away to this crumbling manse called High Place, which is sort of like in this remote area of Hidalgo, I think, like where there was a bunch of silver mines back in the day. And that was indeed where the Doyle family got most of their most of their money from, like from the silver mines. But they've been kind of on hard times a little bit because the silver mines closed after the revolution and all this other kind of stuff. So it goes like a little bit into the history of it, but it's not like, this is mostly like a very story-based, creepy Gothic thing. It goes like a lot into the kind of, not the history of the area, but it does give you enough context that you'll kind of like, understand what's going on. So at the beginning of the book, Noemi's father gets a letter from Catalina, and the letter is really, really weird. Like Catalina is in there basically saying, my husband is trying to poison me, and saying weird stuff about things in the walls. So she sounds like she's kind of losing her marbles a little bit. So the dad is like super worried. And also Noemi, like I said, this is like her best friend when she was growing up. It's her cousin. And she's like, yeah, that doesn't sound too good, does it? So either she needs a psychiatrist or something really bad's going on. So Noemi's dad decides to send her to this house to see what's what. It's like, if we need to bring her back to Mexico City for a little while, if this is not a good marriage, if this Doyle family is like fucking her over, we need to figure out what's going on. So he sends his daughter because he figures, she's really good at kind of diplomacy, I guess. And because she and Catalina were so close, he's hoping that she'll be able to like kind of smooth things over in a way that maybe wouldn't if he went instead. So she goes to this place, as I said, this mansion that's called High Place, where the Doyle family lives. And Catalina is there with her husband, Virgil. Virgil also has I think it's his half brother named Francis. And then there's also a woman who I think is Francis's mom. That's Florence. And then there's like this really, really old, like ancient mummy-like looking dude named Howard, who was kind of like the patriarch of the family. And then there's like a bunch of servants. Now, this mansion is clearly has seen better days. As I said, this is set in 1950. At some point, the Doyles owned like a bunch of silver mines. They had all of these, kind of employees and like, workers that, from the area that lived around there and worked in there. But after the silver mines closed up, they lost a lot of their fortune. So the house is kind of in shitty condition. Now, Noemi shows up, and immediately there's some pretty unsettling shit going on in this house, in the sense of Florence in particular, who was Francis's mom. Is she Virgil's mom too? I can't remember, because it's like there's so much like weird family stuff going on, and I won't. If I go too much into it, it'll kind of like spoil all the stuff that's going on in the family, so I'm trying not to. So we'll just say Florence. She's at least Francis's mom. I can't remember if she's also Virgil's mom. But she's just like this really, really proper. Basically, she comes across at first like she thinks Noemi is, I don't know if I'd call it, but she thinks she's like too modern. She's one of those promiscuous, flighty kind of girls. And it's like they have all these rules in this house. Like, you're not allowed to smoke, which Noemi is like, that's some bullshit right there, because she really, really likes to smoke. Like, when you have dinner with the family, no one's allowed to talk. It's just kind of like all this really creepy shit. And Noemi's just kind of like, yeah, I don't like this situation all that much. And the weird thing too is that when she goes to talk to Catalina is in bed, and the family says, oh, she has tuberculosis and she's supposed to be resting, and so you can't really go up into her room and visit her too much because, you'll wear her out and all this other. So we're taking care of her. We have a doctor that comes every week to check her out named Dr. Cummins. Everything's fine. Why did you even come here? So basically she's like, well, hey, she sent me this crazy letter, and the family just kind of writes that off. They're just kind of like, well, she has TB and she was having a fever and she was having delusions. So maybe she wrote the letter, in the midst of those delusions, and, you're worrying about nothing. Because as you can see, now you're fine. And it does seem that when she goes to talk to Catalina's like, oh yeah, that was so silly. I don't even remember what I wrote. I must have been feverish or something like that. But you're pretty, it's pretty immediately clear that Catalina is not really allowed to speak freely, particularly around the other family members. So you're not really entirely sure what the fuck is going on. So after that, they kind of, Noemi's like, well, okay, well, I think something weird is going on, so I'm not going to leave her here because, that's my cousin, that's my best friend, we grew up together. She's like, so I can't leave without figuring out what's going on. So she starts doing all these things that the other family members in this creepy old house are just cannot put up with, because the great thing about Noemi is such a great character, because like I said, she's very young, she's only in her 20s, but she's kind of very socially adept. She's a socialite. She's very nicely dressed. She's very sophisticated, and she's used to pretty much getting her way. Like, she doesn't like this, oh, you have to submit, you have to like play by our rules. And she's like, nah, I'm not having that. So, you know, she's like, this is my cousin, she's my family member, she's my best friend. I'm going to figure out like what is best for her. You know, not you guys who just kind of like came there later. And so she starts doing shit like, you know, she goes to another doctor like to get a second opinion. She starts going into town, which after a while they say she's not allowed to do that anymore. Like, she's not allowed to go into town, so she has to like sneak off. And then like she starts getting into trouble for like breaking all their rules. So they're basically trying to make her into a prisoner in the same way that they sort of have made Catalina into a prisoner under the guise of, oh, she has tuberculosis and she can't go outside and blah, 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 and all this other kind of stuff. If I say too much about this, because, okay, so like the first probably half to 3/4 of this book is just this kind of stuff. Like Noemi trying to see what the hell is going on with Catalina, what the hell is going on with this family, why are they all so weird, what's going on with this house, because she starts having really weird nightmares that seem more like visions. She does have actual waking visions, like hallucinations in the house, like she sees like mold like moving on the walls and things like that. She starts sleepwalking again, which she hadn't done since she was a child. So obviously, you know, the house is haunted or something is going on. And all I'll say about that is that the house is sort of haunted, but it's not a traditional haunting. And I really, really liked the sort of like originality of how the haunting or the curse or whatever you want to call it was manifesting. It was like, I was like, it's something that that wasn't really in a lot of books, you know what I'm saying? It's just, so I just thought it was like a really cool concept, but that's all that I'm gonna say. It's kind of like an original concept, not completely original because nothing is, but one that you don't see very much, and I thought that was like really cool. Now, interestingly, the Doyle family, even though the town, like the remote town where this book is set, is not a real town, the author, Silvia Moreno-Garcia, did base it on a real place. The place was called Real del Monte, and it was, I guess it was up in the hills, it was a silver mine, and actually over time, because there were so many silver mines there and all these Brits came and set up silver mines or like ran silver mines there. So they brought in all these British workers and Mexican workers from the local area, indigenous people that worked there. And it was like, you know, the conditions were horrible. So it was this kind of whole like history about it. In this area, there were so many British people living there at the time that it was called Little Cornwall. So that's kind of like where she sort of got the idea for this village and this English family who are living in this remote part of Mexico where they used to have a silver mine. But it's like, it's really interesting because that was like a part of the history that I didn't know a great deal about. Like I said, it's not, the story is not like bogged down with all these like historical details, you know what I mean? It's not like, you know, a James Michener kind of thing or anything like that, where it's just kind of like all of this detail, but there's enough detail in there that gives you like a really nice, like it weaves a really nice context like around this story. And the interesting thing too is that the Doyle family are English and they're all kind of like really, really pale and really weird. And especially the patriarch, Howard, who's kind of like this really, really crazy. The way she described him, I kind of thought of like Grandpa from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She said he looked like ancient, like he looked like a fucking mummy or something. And there's some really gross shit like with him later on, like as he's getting sicker and sicker. Some of this stuff toward the end of the book gets like pretty gross as far as like kind of body horror type of stuff, so you know that going in. But like I said, for the first 3/4 it's just basically like a Gothic horror mystery, you know, haunted house type of situation, and then it kind of goes almost, I don't want to say Lovecraftian because that's going to give people the wrong idea, but it does kind of go in like a weird sort of organic body horror sort of direction. So, you know, so like I said, just kind of be warned if you're grossed out easily, because some of the shit at the end is like pretty gross. But the patriarch Howard, you pretty much know he's going to be trouble like from the first time you meet him. Like he comes down to dinner and immediately starts talking about like eugenics and all this other kind of stuff, and how the superior races and inferior races and all this other stuff, to which like Noemi is just like, oh boy. Like even in 1950 she was just kind of like, yeah, no. So you know what I mean? But yeah, so if you really like I said, if you like Daphne du Maurier, if you like, this has been compared to like Guillermo del Toro's stuff as well, which I can kind of see that, because he really likes a lot of gothic horror kind of tropes as well. It gave me like a little bit of like a Crimson Peak kind of vibe, like at the beginning maybe. If that sounds like something that you would like I said, it gets weird like at the end, and it's not a ghost or a haunted house in the traditional sense. Like the house is sort of haunted or cursed, but not in the way that you might think. You know what I mean? Because like the house has like a creepy history. Like the family seems like it's kind of cursed. Like there's like one of the relatives like back in the day like shot the whole like her whole family and then herself, and you know, so there's that kind of stuff going on too. And so a lot of the book is sort of like Noemi like figuring out the history of the house and figuring out what the fuck is going on with this weird ass family, fending off Virgil, who is Catalina's husband and who is also like a really creepy, aggressive douchebag. And she has this thing too where she's almost kind of like simultaneously like attracted to him and repelled by him at the same time. So there's that kind of fascinating stuff too. But she's just Noemi is just like a great protagonist. She's just so, I think I saw one review that called her spunky, which I don't know, it seems like a little reductive, but I get what they're getting at. She's just like she's kind of like a no nonsense. It's weird because she's kind of like, you would think because she's this kind of young fashion plate who kind of only cares about partying. But when she gets to this place and there's a mystery to be solved and Catalina, she thinks is in danger, she steps right up and is just kind of like, yeah, I'm going to like try and figure this out and like sort it out. And as I said, she's very used to kind of getting her way, not in a like a babyish like kind of like I need my way kind of thing, but she's very used to like getting what she wants and knowing how to get what she wants, like through social interaction and things like that. So it's really interesting to see her and this weird ass family kind of like butting heads like through the whole thing. Like it's all this kind of family drama. But yeah, I was really, really into this book. As I said, if you like Gothic literature of any kind, whether it's, you know, Jane Austen, for everything from Jane Austen to Guillermo del Toro, then you would probably love this. I thought it was great. Oh, and also I want to show you this. I don't know if they had this in the hardback, but look at this, you guys. Look, I'm sorry if you're just listening to the audio. Look at that. That's like the inner flyleaf. I love that. I want that like on a poster to like put, you know what I mean? To put on my wall, because that is like a beautiful, beautiful piece of art. I'm not really sure who did that. Yeah, that's an amazing piece of artwork and I love it so much. But yeah, this was a great book. I can see why it got all the accolades and everything like that. So I would definitely recommend it. If you're into that kind of literature, you will probably love it just like I did. And that will do it for this Tomes of Terror, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.